I'm Marcia Hathaway. I'm a professor in the Department of Animal Science at the University of Minnesota. I teach the equine nutrition classes there. And this is Amanda Grev. She's also a graduate student at the University of Minnesota in the equine program. And what we're going to be doing today is showing you how to weigh horse feed. And you're probably going to say, why should I even bother to weigh horse feed? And the answer is that when we calculate a horse's ration, what we need to do is we base it on how much your horse weighs, or its body weight. So that an adult horse on average will consume about 2 to 2.5% of its body weight in dry matter every day. So if you had a 1,000-pound horse, which is kind of average, it would eat 20 to 25 pounds of, say, hay every day. When I ask a horse owner what they feed their horse, what they tell me is that they feed 2 to 3 flakes of hay and a scoop of grain in the morning and the same thing at night. And the problem with that is different flakes of hay weigh different amounts. And so what we're going to show you is how you can figure out how much weight of hay you're actually providing and how much difference there can be depending upon the type of hay you're feeding. So what you're going to do is you're going to want to use something like a leaf tarp that you can get at any home improvement store, and you're going to want to use a scale. It can be a luggage scale or a fish scale or a lamb scale, and you're going to want to tear the empty leaf tarp.
This is a little bit harder than
You can help. So you get that tear, so you subtract out how much the tarp weighs.
Okay.
And then you're going to take your flake of hay. We're going to start with the grass hay. So Amanda, if you want to just put that up here. And then you're just going to repeat the whole thing again with a flake of grass hay. You can see here. Hook it up, and we'll get a weight on that. So how much does it weigh, Amanda, when the hay's there?
2.5 pounds.
So a flake of grass hay is going to weigh 2.5 pounds. So now we're going to compare that to what a flake of alfalfa or a legume mix hay would be. So we've already got the scale tears for the tarp. So Amanda, if you want to just grab the other flake of hay. This is a legume grass mix hay. It's about the same size or volume, and we'll get a weight on this. And how much does that weigh, Amanda?
8 pounds.
8 pounds. So what you can see is that even though the flakes of hay look very similar in terms of size, how much they weighed was tremendously different. So when you're trying to figure out that you want to feed your horse 20 to 25 pounds of hay a day, in one case you might feed only a total of 3 of these flakes, and in that case you might have to feed up to 6 flakes in order to meet the requirement that you would have. So do you really want to weigh, you can take that off, Amanda, if you want. Do you really want to weigh your horse's hay every day? Well, obviously not. So what you can do is you can just measure a number of flakes, maybe 5 or 6, and get an idea of on an average how much they weigh, and then you can use that calculation to determine how much of that you're going to feed. Alternatively, you could weigh the entire bale if you're using small square bales, and you could decide how much of that bale on a percentage, maybe half of a bale. If the bale weighs 45 pounds, you'd know you need to feed half a day in 2 meals or a quarter bale of every meal. So you have the same situation that you have with the hay when you're talking about you feed a scoop of grain. So there's all different kinds of grains and concentrates, and they all weigh different amounts. And really the only way to know what you're feeding is to go ahead and weigh them. So we're going to show you how you might do that with some easy things to use. So we can have different size scoops, you can have different size containers. You can use a bucket with a hanging scale like we used for the hay if you want. What we have is a little bit more sophisticated scale here, but you can just use a kitchen scale. So first we're going to go ahead and tear this. And then Amanda, why don't you go ahead and put like essentially a scoop's worth of corn, because we're going to want them to be about the same volume, and we can measure that right on here. Okay, keep going. So when you put in this amount of corn, what we're going to have is essentially 4 pounds. And now we're going to compare that to if we used oats. So we're going to put in the same quantity in terms of volume of oats. We'll empty the beaker. Put in the same quantity of oats. So remember that corn weighed 4 pounds. So that's the same volume of grain as we fed the corn, but this is oats. And that's going to weigh approximately 3 pounds. So you can see even though you measured out the same amount, say you used a scoop, what you're feeding is 25% more by weight in terms of the corn. If you factor in the fact that the corn is more energy dense than the oats, the difference is actually even magnified. And you're talking about feeding it multiple times a day, multiple weeks, over the course of a year. It can really add up. I think we have a sweet feed also we can use. So If you decide you don't want to use a product like corn or oats, a lot of people buy a commercial feed product. This is an example of one. I don't know if there's quite as much in there as we had in the other one, but let's see. Yep, that's good. And it weighs 3.5 pounds. So it's halfway in between, which kind of makes sense. If you look at it closely, you see it's a mix of corn and oats and some pellets. The nice thing about a commercial horse product is by law they have to have feeding directions right on the bag or on the tag. So it will tell you need to feed, again, it's based on your horse's body weight. You need to feed, say, 6 pounds of this product every day for a 1,000-pound horse. That means you'd weigh out or measure 3 pounds in the morning, and you'd measure out and weigh out 3 pounds in the evening. And what you can easily do if you don't want to have to measure it every time, and of course you wouldn't want to, is you can use some sort of container that you can go ahead and dump the feed in at the right level and then just make a mark and know when I feed at this point, then I'm feeding the correct amount. What you might be tempted to do is maybe your horse is going to be getting fat, right? So you buy this commercial product and it says you should feed 6 pounds a day, but your horse is gaining a little bit more weight than you want, so you're going to say, I'm going to cut it back to 4 pounds a day. And you can do that, and you would cut down the calories and maybe reduce the horse's weight. But at the same time, these products, for the most part, have been balanced to contain the necessary vitamins and minerals. And when you cut back by a third, say, of how much you're feeding, you're also cutting back on the vitamins and minerals that you really can't see because they're in such small quantities. And now your horse has a deficiency of those nutrients in his diet. So you really need to feed according to the manufacturer's recommendations that's right on the bag. Or make a completely different choice, which could be to use something like a Ration Balancer. And a Ration Balancer is something that you would feed in much smaller quantities. A Ration Balancer is designed to have a very concentrated amount of vitamins and trace minerals. And the recommendation, again, would be on the feed tag or on the bag. But more than likely, what they're going to recommend is you feed maybe is like 1 pound to 1.5 pounds. Like this shows like 1/2 pound, and this goes up clear to 1 pound. And you can get these with the bags. And so instead of having to weigh yourself, you can just rely on this. And you'd feed a much smaller quantity, probably just once a day, and knowing that you're meeting the trace mineral and vitamin requirements. Okay, so another kind of feed that you might want to measure that a lot of people use are senior feeds. So Amanda, go ahead and put some senior feed in here, and we'll come up to about the same level that we were using before, which is about here. And that's good. That's going to be perfect. And then see how much that weighs. So that came out to be a little under 3 pounds. So what you're going to see is that this was more similar to the oats than it certainly was to the corn or to the mixed feed. And so it's important to measure out these feeds, especially I would say in the case of senior feeds, because lots of times you feed much larger quantities of them to some of the senior horses. And so it's critical that you know how much you're feeding and you provide the right amount. So I think the most important things you need to take from this is that you need to know how much your horse weighs so you can calculate that they'll eat 2 to 2.5% of their body weight each day in feed, and to know how much feed that is, you need to be able to weigh it. And you can use things as common as a scale, a leaf tarp, and a bucket. Weigh out your hay, weigh out your grain, add it up and know just exactly how much you're feeding. So you can kind of see how important it is to measure by weight how much you're feeding, so that you can meet your horse's requirements because they are determined by your horse's body weight.